All right, if you don't mind just telling us your name.
Sure. My name is Jack Dawkins.
Awesome. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about your childhood?
I feel like for a very long time, the way I would answer that question is saying it was normal. And the more you look around the world, you realize that normal is a pretty obscure term. No one really has the same childhood as anyone else. But I did very much have like a house in the suburbs with a yard and 2 dogs, an older sister. So in that way, kind of like very aesthetically traditional. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, yeah, I had a great childhood. Played a bunch of sports. I grew up spending every summer at a pool. I was a total pool rat. And then went on to be a lifeguard. So like never really left the concrete and fence area that I was in. And yeah, I was a really shy kid. Super, super nervous about a lot of things. And then when I was 14, I went to boarding school. That's another, like, what is childhood? When does that stop? Right?
You're
like,
going, yeah.
you make it up, right? But when I think about that period of time, visiting grandparents for holidays, like all the family traditions you would have. The combination, I guess, like, so my dad was born on the East Coast, but then moved around a lot as a kid. He lived in Mexico, Venezuela, Puerto Rico, and then Oklahoma before ending up on the East Coast for work. And my mom was from Florida, Pensacola, which is really close to Alabama. So different personalities, different energies, but very complementary in a lot of ways. We traveled a ton. We were super lucky. So I got to see a lot of stuff when I was little.
I saw you get a little bit emotional. Was that a happy emotion, or?
Like the childhood always has some good nostalgia to it. I think the piece it's interesting, like, so I'm 35, I'm almost 36. Yeah. I have a daughter who's 5 years old. And, you know, as you get older, you see your parents as more human. And I think the way that I experience that is, like, you know, at first they're infallible. They're your parents. Yeah. They're perfect. And then you start to see some cracks and you recognize some imperfections or maybe some things that you don't necessarily connect to in terms of, you know, how they function, how they operate in the world. And for me, like, there was some frustration and resentment to that because I think I worked so hard to make them happy. And now I'm, like, coming into another era of life where as a parent, I'm like, ooh, fuck, this is hard. It's like you recognize that anything that you would perceive as a shortcoming is just them being a human and trying to figure out how to love, and how to do that while having a career and maintaining friendships and living in New York, which is not necessarily an easy place to be. And so the pause is, you know, I want to be honest. Was my childhood perfect? No. Would a lot of people have preferred my childhood to theirs? Probably. And at the time when you're going through it, you're so unaware of all of this internal dialogue that gets added as you get older and older. So I want to give you a straight answer, and yet it's harder and harder to do that as the number of ways that you can kind of look back change.
What were your dreams or aspirations as a child?
So this is one of my parents' favorite stories. When I was in, I think, 1st or 2nd grade, we got asked that question, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I had a calendar, and I was going to be a different job every day of the week. So it was like Monday fireman, Tuesday waiter, like, who knows, painter on Wednesday. Yeah. And, like, I don't think any of the things I actually picked ended up coming true. I did work in restaurants for a while, so that one stuck around. But the idea of needing and wanting to do a lot of things and wanting to be active and busy, and the idea of doing one thing never ever made sense to me. That was very, very true. So I guess, like, I dreamed, and I still dream in a lot of ways, of having a journey. Like, I want my life to be nonlinear. I want to keep exploring and keep learning and keep trying new things, like, hopefully until I'm dead. Or at some point I'll wave the white flag and be like, all right, just bring the rum. Like, I'll just be by the pool. But in the grand scheme, no, I want to keep moving and learning and growing and getting shit wrong. That's living.
Would you mind telling us a little bit more about your relationship with your dad and how that relationship felt generally for you?
I love my dad. He is, he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. And just has an insane appetite for learning. The man just devours articles and books and podcasts, and just like, he cannot get enough information coming into his cranium. It's constant. And he has a playfulness about him that doesn't always come out, but like, I think sometimes he does a better job than I do of like staying connected to his inner child a little bit. He's also an incredibly intense person. He's been extremely driven his entire life, and had some, I mentioned he moved around a lot as a kid, so he had a lot of instability in his life, and so for him it was a really important tenet to be stable in his life, to create stability around him. And he did that by working hard and earning money and creating stability around him. And you know, sometimes that wears on you, because I think he really enjoyed what he did. Professionally, he worked in finance for many years, private equity. He's extraordinarily good at it. You know, is it his true passion? I don't know. But it served a purpose, and that's a stressful field to be in, particularly for 40 years. And so, you know, again, just what I was speaking to about the arc, he pushed me a lot when I was younger, and there was times when I was like, man, that felt necessary. A little harder than it needed to be. And even now, sometimes I'll catch him just trying to push, and it really comes from a place of just wanting me to be happy. And all he's trying to do is take his resources and his understanding of how to find, I think for him, stability, because that's what makes him happy, that's what brings him peace, and offer that to me as a salve when I'm feeling lost or frustrated or confused. And for a long time, I wasn't able to see that as love. And as I've gotten older and I've been able to take better care of myself, I can better see that his efforts have only come from a place of trying to be a loving father.
How would you describe how that relationship felt, very briefly, one or two sentences, when you were young versus to where you're at now?
You know, it's similar. His cheesy ass line that he's used forever, you know, I was the first member of your fan club. And when I look back at childhood and I think about now, I think even when he gets in his own way, or even when he gets frustrated with me, that's still true to its core.
What about your relationship with your mom? How was that, and how did that generally feel for you?
My mom has an enormous heart. She's from the South, right? Like, it's that sense of generosity and hospitality come so ingrained in that whole structure. And so part of the reason I think I ended up in restaurants is because it's in my blood, literally. Like, you know, if a friend came over, it was not like, you know, go do what you want. It was like, can we feed you? Do you need anything? How can we make you more comfortable? And like, that I've always brought with me. She always jokes she ends up being the person who gets sat at the table at weddings with all the people that they don't know where to put, because my mom can talk to anybody. Yeah. She got that more than I did. And you know, our relationship, I think that's really where we bonded, just in the desire to take care of people and to take care of each other. I think she gives amazing gifts, and that's something I've always tried to sort of do in her footsteps. They're always thoughtful, they're always specific. She's a much better rapper than I am. Always like bows and pretty glitter and shit. And she's like, why don't you put a bow on that? It's like, hey, yeah. But yeah, and as far as our relationship, again, like, there's a window where like I want so badly to make them happy, and then there's a window where it feels like nothing I do makes them happy. Mm-hmm. And then you do realize at some point, it's like, well, it's because like my happiness is my responsibility and hers is hers. So me trying to fix shit in me to make her happy doesn't work. And so again, like, you know, some rocky ups and downs is that we both sort of navigated that, and now I'm coming into a place where I can just love and appreciate her for who she is, and not not need her to be a certain way or to give me a certain thing to make the relationship work.
Would you like to talk about an instance of that, or
Of which part specifically?
like, for example, a moment where you're trying to earn the love, or you're trying to, reach for something that, as adults, we probably know that it's just already there, but still you're feeling to have to reach, and that dynamic that like kind of helped kind of fuel that dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, so it's funny, I mentioned like my dad is in finance, but so was my mom, and like she cut her teeth in finance in New York in the early 80s when New York was like not an awesome place to be. So like she's got a thick skin, she's also incredibly intelligent. And so for me, it was like anytime I was going to explain why I did something or what I was doing, I just felt this extraordinary burden that it had to be like really smart and really thoughtful and, make perfect sense with this larger life plan that I had. And what I wanted was for them to reflect back like, oh, you've thought about this a lot. This makes a lot of sense. I see where you're going. And it felt like all I would get back was more questions and more like, well, I don't really know why you're doing that, or that doesn't seem to make sense. And for a long time, I internalized that as like something is wrong with me. I can't communicate clearly, or I don't have a good sense of where I want to go. And it's not. It was just, a gap in probably 150 other things happening all at once. But yeah, and like now, being able to relinquish that and just being able to leave with like, I'm really happy. I love what I'm doing. It makes it so much easier for them to just be like, awesome. We're really happy that you're happy. And we don't have to get into the details because I don't need to convince them that it's a good idea. I can just share with them that I'm happy. And it makes it much easier for them to be like, well, awesome. We're happy that you're happy. Because again, as a parent, like, I know I don't always get it right, but at the end of the day, I just want my daughter to be happy.
What's the biggest thing you learned from your parents?
The biggest thing? What a great question. Keep going.
Can you tell us about your first love and how that felt?
I mean, I think my first love was love.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, of course. Like, I think when you see what is possible in the face of love, whether that's romantic, whether it's when someone loves a sport or an artistic pursuit, like when the heart has its hands on the steering wheel, get the fuck out of the way. Like, I think that's when amazing things are going to happen. And so like, I don't know if I could pinpoint like an earliest memory necessarily, but I've always just had such an affection for, what it usually manifests as passion. People who are just so excited and enlivened and enriched by what it is they're doing. Even if it's like one of my aunts makes chocolates. You should hear her talk about it. Like, she could talk about it for hours and hours and hours and hours, and she finds it so fascinating, and she just loves what she does. And it's such a joy to be around her because she has such enthusiasm for it. So I think I love love.
Can you tell us about your first loss or heartbreak?
When I was either like 11 or 12, I was at sleepaway camp up in Maine, and the structure of the camp is like a month long, and within that month, your cabin would take a week-long trip, either canoeing or hiking and backpacking. And our cabin had just gone on our week-long trip, and it rained every fucking day. It rained every day. It was a really tough trip, but like, we were able to hike some really exciting trails, and we were able to get over a couple of passes that a lot of other cabins in past years hadn't been able to, and it was this great trip. But what I remember most is that there was one counselor who every night for like hours would sit in this shitty, leaky lean-to and play spit and war with us for like hours on end. His name was Chris Martinet. So we finished the trip, we get back, and then like 2 days later, we wake up in the morning, we find out he died in a drunk driving accident the night before out with a bunch of the other counselors. And like, I hadn't had a relative pass, I hadn't had a dog like that was really the first time I sort of experienced death up close. And when I think back to it, like, it connects me to my sense of being an empath, because like what I realize is like how much sadness there is when it's collective. It's not just one person sad. It's like you're just seeing all these kids and all these counselors and all these directors, like, you know, crying, grieving, going through it. His family came to a service at the camp and trying as a 12-year-old to wrap your head around like what it would be like to lose a child. Like, it's not that you can connect to that feeling, but you can sense the immensity of it. You can see how altered people are by that experience. So it's funny, like I almost remember it more forensically of just like having such a profound awareness of how everyone around me was feeling in that moment. And if anything, like it was probably a little bit of shock, and I was just numb and just trying to like make sense of it as a younger person.
Who would you say first taught you love and how?
This is going to sound like a strange answer. My dog. Like, I feel like I have to qualify. It doesn't mean my parents didn't love me or teach me how to love. But I think, again, like where I am now in life, the goal is to love without condition. Because if I can be okay without you being okay, and I can just love you exactly where you are, no matter how you're feeling or what you're going through, the gift of unconditional love is so extraordinary. And as a parent, it is so hard to give to your child, because you also want to raise them right, and you want to do these things and blah, blah, blah. And with friendships, like there's all these variables, and even in romantic relationships, right? It's like you have your individual path, you have your container that you're in together. It's challenging. And yet, like when you look at the way a dog shows up to a relationship, it's like even on your worst days, even when you are not the kindest person, even when you are struggling, like there's just this patient, present love, always. And so, you know, it sounds trite, but if I could aspire to be that type of presence to anyone, I know what a deep gift it is to just be a presence of love in someone's life. And so that idea of just that constant, gentle presence of love, to me is the important one, and that came from my pup.
How do you define love?
Yeah, I mean, I think my sense of love when I was young is like obsession, affection, you know, some mix of those things, right? It's like treating someone like they're the most important thing in the world and sacrificing every part of yourself for that person. That's a great story. Like there's a false sense of nobility in it, but boy, it doesn't make you happy. It's not sustainable. I think what I understand now is that love is born internally. Your ability to love another person is directly related to how deeply you are capable of loving yourself. And I think you can hear that sentiment in different places. Very recently, I got to have an experience where I actually started to feel that, where like the depth of my ability to love myself and accept myself is an immediate reflection of how deeply I can love and accept another person. And so in some ways, like, you know, I said my first love was love. I also think like, you know, love is connection, love is inspiration, love is how you get through the hard shit. It is like, it is the fuel for everything.
How does that feel?
Fucking awesome. You know how awesome it feels that it's not like, actually you have to grind for your whole fucking life until you're a nub, until there's like nothing left for your life to be awesome, or like you have to be born with some IQ, or you need this pedigree, or like, nope. Like if you can really fucking love yourself exactly as you are and be excited about yourself, that doesn't mean you don't mess up. You know, that doesn't mean you don't have to self-correct or be hard on yourself at times. But like the part of this experience I had that was so profound was like I experienced love like a grandmother. I had two wonderful grandmothers, but I don't remember receiving love from them in this way. And it's the same. It's the way where like a grandmother can welcome you in and feed you and nourish you when you're cold or you're tired and you're hurt, and it feels like they can be a salve for anything. And they can also look at you and be like, you're being an idiot. Like, what are you doing? Like, I love you, and like, stop. This is stupid. And the idea that love can be playful and generous and tell you when you're doing it wrong and still come from a loving place. You know, love is not all butterflies and rainbows. Like, there is an edge to love. You know, it's like if you really love a friend who you see is fucking up, sometimes stepping away from that person can be love. Sometimes telling them to their face, hey, you're fucking up. That's actually love. That's not necessarily conflict. And so, you know, how does it feel? It feels amazing.
What's a good day look like for you?
Lately, and I mean like very recently, because I struggled with this for a long time, like I've been in a huge like morning on fire kick. So like meditating, journaling, reading nonfiction and fiction, practicing piano, practicing Spanish. Like it's a good 2-hour block where I really feel like I'm just pouring into myself and kind of feeding myself all the things that I need. Some kind of movement. I'm a bit of a workout junkie, so at least an hour of some kind of good exercise. I love to cook, so when I get to make my meals for the day, that makes me really, really happy. Making music is my craft right now, and so when I can make music in a way that feels connected to play or to joy or to introspection, that's great. Sometimes you're like, fuck, I need to get this song done, and so you're being a little more analytical, and sometimes you're really creating from a place of an emotion or from inspiration. You know, sometimes like I have songs that write themselves in 3 minutes, and it's a joy because it's almost like the thoughts were living there and I just had to find the well, and the hand is just kind of capturing them in the moment. You know, anytime I can make all those things happen, that's
when you're making music, does it feel like love?
It can, if I let it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, coming back a little bit, like love is also about surrender. I don't think love is built to be shaped. It can be directed, but you can't say like, oh, like I'm gonna take these 45 minutes and love. Like, no. Like it's an energy. And so with making music or writing songs, like it's about kind of catching it. And so one of the major practices I've been in is, you know, when making music feels really good, make a lot. You know, it's like, oh, I wrote 4 songs already today. It's like, yeah, but I still want to make more. Make 4 more songs. And then the days when you're not feeling it, again, like I can practice piano, I can rehearse old songs, I can do all these other things that continue to support what I'm trying to do. But the act of creating, for me, for it to be really connected, it has to feel right. It has to come from that organic place.
What's a bad day like for you, and how do you get through that bad day?
A bad day is when my brain takes over. You know, I heard this not too long ago, but like, joy is in the present moment, and outside of the present moment is where all the other shit comes in, fear and anxiety and scarcity. And I'm an ambitious person, and I make music. So the model is like, can I sell out arenas? Can I go platinum? Can I get 1 billion streams? Can I get 1 million followers and this, that, the other? And if I look at where I am today, and I look at where that thing is, like far, really fucking far, and that starts the internal churn of like, fuck, I need to be doing more. I'm falling behind. I'm not pushing myself. Like, why am I being such a pussy? Blah, 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 blah. And what's awesome, or what's becoming awesome, is it's like that voice I don't think ever goes away. Maybe it changes, but I don't think it goes away. But my relationship to that voice can change. So I can hear those words now, I can feel that sentiment, and rather than changing my whole day to try to align with those needs, I can instead hear that voice and say like, oh yeah, like that's my ego. It's trying to protect me. It's saying like, you have these goals and we want them to come true, and that's what we want for you. And it's like, yeah, awesome, cool. I don't have to do it that way, but I hear you. It's like, you just want me to do the best I can. Great, I'll go do that. And like, in terms of getting through it, I think there's a fine line. And again, going back to workouts, I was an endurance athlete for a very long time. So I've had a lot of workouts, a lot of shitty workouts. Like, you have your good days and your bad days. And the way I always approach a workout is you have to do the first interval. And so, you know, say you have a track workout, you're going to do 10-mile repeats, whatever it is. your body feels like shit, you're mentally tired, you're frustrated, you don't want to do it, you have to show up, you have to warm up, and you have to do the first one. After you do the first one, you can call it. And you can say, like, you know what, it's just not the day. And accept that your body or your mind or whatever it is just isn't in the right place. And so again, when I have those days and the mental chatter is loud, again, I acknowledge it and say, thank you for that. I sit down to do what I was going to do for the day. And sometimes the wheels loosen up and everything kind of starts moving. And sometimes it's like, no, we're just closed for business. Not today. And when that happens, I clean, I run errands, go see a movie, okay, cool, it's not my day.
What's a person or an event that shaped you, good or bad?
I mean, a couple come to mind, but the one that comes most immediately to mind is the '08 financial crisis. So I graduated from college in 2009, and I went to Harvard. And when you're coming out of Harvard, there's a pretty solid stream into consulting, banking, financial analysis. It's like jobs in big stone boxes downtown where you wear a suit, like plenty of those available. And as you're sort of moving toward graduation and you start to evaluate your options, a lot of companies pay a lot of money to be on campus and get in front of you and say, like, yeah, this is a great path. And so I know a lot of my friends and I sort of studied and worked our way into the feeding system for all those jobs. I may have never gotten one, but I know that in 2009 it was particularly hard to get one because Lehman Brothers had just exploded and like the markets were total shit. And so hiring levels were way down for a lot of those jobs. So I graduated with no idea what I was going to do. And I ended up becoming a busboy. And then I spent 9 years in hospitality and did everything from managed a beverage program in New York that was multi-millions of dollars. I started my own concept with a business partner out of business school. I met a ton of incredible people. And like now, even though I make music, my frame of mind is always like, what's the experience I'm giving someone? How do I welcome them into what I'm doing? Like hospitality influences so much of what I do. And I don't think I would have ever gotten into it if I had gotten some consulting job. I don't think I would have stayed in consulting for a terribly long time, but it's unlikely that I would have pivoted into restaurants if I had to guess.
What inspires you?
People. I think people are inspiring. There's two forms, right? I think like one is nature. Like when you just look at how extraordinarily beautiful this world is and how much detail there is that like you can notice if you give yourself the presence of mind to do so. But like, it sounds so ridiculous. If you've just stared at grass and notice how different each blade is and how each of them go into the ground at different angles and they have different thicknesses and some are bug-eaten, some are this, like there's just so much happening. There's so much life always that's like, if you just tune into it, it reminds you of how small you are and what a blessing it is to be a part of this larger thing. And so like, sometimes when I'm obsessed with like my Instagram post didn't do well, I'm like, go outside. Like you need to take a walk. But the other is people. Because so like I'm spoiled right now because I have a 5-year-old, so I'm watching a ton of kids movies and reading kids books and like just the creativity that humans are harnessing on a daily basis just to make art, just to make things that bring you joy, just to make you think, to make you feel. It's just an extraordinary time to be alive. And like I acknowledge the privilege that comes with being able to be in a place where like I have the time and the resources to notice those things. But my goodness, like it's just so exciting and fun. Like, look, we're in a hotel room because you had an idea and then you kept going. And now it's become something that people can follow and can get inspired by and can learn from. Like, and I don't know where the idea came from exactly. I don't know exactly what your process was like to get it, but I'm curious. I want to know. And like, you know, I have a story, you have a story. There's billions of them. There's billions of stories out there. And I love the idea that like I get to write mine in exactly the way I want, moving toward the things that motivate and inspire me. and that there will be some people for whom that's exciting and motivating. There will be some people who think I'm fucking crazy, and nobody's wrong, right? Like, we get to have our experience and our relationships to other people how we want to. I just think that's awesome.
What's been a humbling experience for you?
My old business partner from after business school, I remember him saying something I thought was so interesting. Part of the reason it can be good to be an athlete as a kid is you learn to fail. Mm-hmm. Like, there is no one who has ever been an athlete for any period of time who hasn't struck out, fucking missed the kick for the big game, gone wide of the goal, missed the tackle in the football game. Take your pick. Like, I'm sure it happens in the arts as well, but if you think about it, like, when you rehearse a piece of music, the variability you're going to encounter when you go perform that piece of music on stage, relatively minimal. It's your instrument, it's your body, and you're just at a microphone. On the field, there's so many things, including the other team, which is trying to fuck up your shit. Mm-hmm. Like, there's so many ways. I should have asked, is it okay to swear? Great. So, you know, like, I've been an athlete my whole life, so I've had plenty of failures in that way. Then I became an endurance athlete, and again, I've done a couple of Ironmans, a bunch of half Ironmans, like the really long stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you do the really long stuff, like, you don't nail every workout. You just don't. You have days where your body is just exhausted, or the weather doesn't cooperate, or whatever it is. And so, you know, you can have a vision of what your week is going to look like and have it completely blow up in your face. And then it becomes so much more about how do you respond to the fact that shit went sideways, and not at all about, you know, whether or not it did go sideways. And then from an artistic perspective, like, I've had songs get more than 100,000 streams. I put out a song on Friday and it has 8. And it's because I've been busy and I didn't do a lot to promote it ahead of time, and like the cycle's a little bit behind, but like some shit you make people really love, and some shit you make people are like, why'd you make that? It's like, you don't always know which it's gonna be. And so that is certainly humbling.
Can you tell me about a time in your life that you can relate with the word war?
So the two things that feel present, again, on the athletic side, sounds so dramatic. Like, I did an Ironman up in Idaho and it was 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Mm-hmm. And like, that's not a contest. That's not a competition. That is truly just like fighting your own like well-being. And there were bodies everywhere. People who like collapsing off their bikes, falling down during the run, just like a calamity of humans, like all aspiring to go somewhere and get something done and being utterly defeated. I mean, but I think the most present one is 9/11. So it was my first week of boarding school, so I was away from home, and my mom used to work in Battery City, so she was blocks from where the towers were. Or at least her job was. She ended up not having to navigate that. But I remember that was another experience where like you hear it, because we weren't watching TV, but we heard the news, and like your brain starts to wrap itself around what that means. And I remember, so we had chapel 3 times a week, and we had chapel on Tuesdays. So we were in the chapel. They made this announcement, and 2 or 3 people started screaming and running out because their parents either worked there or they didn't know what had happened to them. And again, like the gravity of it, and like the charge of the emotion around it is what I remember most deeply about that.
That was in the moment. How was it then processing that in the coming days from that? How was that as well? How did that war, how did you navigate that?
It's a great question, and I think what's funny is like, we didn't live in New York City, we lived in the suburbs. My parents worked in the city, but we lived in the suburbs. So in some ways, like, I was as disconnected from that moment as someone living in any of the other 49 states, right? It wasn't like, you know, my neighborhood got destroyed, or I knew a whole slew of people who went through it. There were some people at our school who had friends and family members who passed. You know, if anything, like, we were just lucky to be in this little bubble. And I mean, boarding school, as you can imagine, is the bubble of all bubbles. Like, you're just in this tiny campus in this small New England town. There's 550 kids total across all 4 classes. And the piece that I think is helpful is that there's a lot of teachers and staff relative to the number of kids. And so we felt so safe. And it's crazy. What I'm thinking about now is, like, back then, the idea of danger at that place is insane. And now schools have become so dangerous. And so, like, the way that processing might have felt could have been so different if 9/11 had happened 20 years later. But at the time, I just remember, like, it sounds really fucked up to say, that, like, if anything, it was kind of minimized. It was like, we're safe here, we're doing our thing, like, we're part of this community is safe, it's going to be okay.
I would say you should be provided that feeling, especially during something like that. Like, the school should offer you that feeling of, you know, that's extraordinary to have an environment where, you know, you see that happening, and you're in the state, so you're not that far.
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen. You know, your mom works right there.
Yep.
And then to have an environment where it was, like, at least emotionally, you know, maybe in your mind you thought something, but you felt that, you know, I know when I'm in times of, like, danger, the people around me make me feel safe. And even if we're not safe, it's like, well, we're all in this together. Well, you do have a sense that it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
I think, you know, that was beautiful that you had that. I was super disconnected when I saw it on the news, and I didn't know how much it would affect, you know, the lives around me. My brother would join the military, my sister would join the Marine Corps, my brother would lose both his legs, and you know, in Afghanistan, you know, years down the road, you know, but in support of Operation Iraqi Enduring Freedom. You know, but I just remember watching it on the TV, and it was like watching a movie. It just didn't seem real. You know, it's like it didn't fully register, and I think, you know, even now we still deal with the repercussions of that. And even with my brother, like, we have conversations, and, you know, that moment affected so many lives that it's incomprehensible sometimes. But in the moment, I didn't feel, when I was watching it on TV, I didn't feel almost anything. I was just like, whoa.
It was hard to believe it was real.
Yeah.
Like, I watched the second plane. I know a lot of people did.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, that's crazy.
Exactly.
Not like you can't, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people did. Either I didn't have the resources or I wasn't in the state of mind, but it's like the idea that you watch people die on live TV, like, en masse, like,
it couldn't register.
You can't process that.
And you're watching it on TV, yeah.
Right.
If you can go in your mind and think, this life event could be mental, physical, or spiritual, can you tell me about a time in your life that you can relate to the word peace?
So, almost exactly a month ago, actually, I did ayahuasca for the first time. And I did it down at a place in Costa Rica, and did 4 ceremonies 4 nights in a row. So it's like a relatively deep indoctrination into a relationship with this plant medicine. And on one of the nights, I experienced what's called a download, or that's at least a term they use. And it sounds like there's, like, an audiobook narrator in your head. Like, it's crystal clear. It's not your voice. It is the presence of something else, something other. And when I mentioned earlier that feeling of love that felt like a grandmother, that was that voice. And that was where a lot of the knowing and understanding around love for yourself. And more than that, it was the idea that, like, I had always been loved. I was loved in that moment, and I would always be loved. And when I arrived at that retreat, like my intention was to better understand why I was feeling lonely. You know, like I had a story that loneliness was just part of life. Like there are always moments when you just sort of feel alone. But I had made a lot of changes. I went through a divorce. I moved across the country. I changed careers. Like I sort of turned over every rock I had in my life, and like that feeling felt like it didn't budge. I was like, well, that's odd. And so I went to this retreat just curious of like, you know, maybe I could better understand that. And when I felt that understanding that like I was never alone, because whether you call it love or the universe or spirit or God or whatever you want to refer to it as, like had always been there, was there in that moment, and would always be there, I felt, yeah, total peace. Total peace.
So the voice was audible.
Very much so.
Do you remember some of the things the voice said?
Yeah.
Or the presence, the energy, whatever, however you, the terminology for it.
Yeah. This is going to start to tie some threads together. So, this is going to sound like such a crazy answer. So, how do I want to explain this? Well, let me not overcomplicate it. Yeah, the way I experienced it was first, you're in this massive room with people who are taking the medicine. The download first said, I want you to go outside. I want you to be alone when we have this conversation. Okay. So I go outside, I'm lying in the grass, I'm underneath the stars. So I'm more kind of connected to nature in this moment. And what I heard her say was like, I'm holding you right now. And you know that because I just told you to go outside, because you're lying in my grass, because you're looking at my stars. So you're connected to this, but it's always been here. And I started to have flashbacks, and I started to see all these things that in the moment I attributed no significance to at all. Like totally benign moments in my life that seemed so ordinary and so uninteresting, and how they had ultimately propelled me to meeting a new person or trying a new thing or doing something. And she was like, I've been there the whole time. I've always been looking out for you, and I'm going to keep looking out for you, always. You don't have to worry.
What was the feeling?
It was relief. It was relief. It was like this fear and anxiety of not being enough, or not doing enough with my life, or not figuring it out, or not getting it right, or not finding what I was supposed to find. You know, like I've had this weird itch to do this internal searching for like I want to say my whole life, for certainly a very long time, and like something I've more seriously invested in the last 6 years. Just peeling back layers of like, why do I feel this way, and why do I think this way, and why do I have compulsions toward these different things? And I learned so much in doing that work, and like it's been a blessing to do. But again, there was still this expectation of like, I'll arrive at some point, whether you want to call that wisdom or enlightenment. Like I kept waiting to get to that point. And in that moment, like that whole facade vanished. It was like, no, like all you're doing is just being you. And being you is going to take you on this path that I built for you. So you don't have to fucking figure it out. Like it's already there. Like just be yourself and allow it to transpire. And if you can, like enjoy that shit.
Yeah, I had a moment with whom I call God, and specifically Jesus. And I always hear people talk about, you know, their experiences with ayahuasca or, you know, different spiritual experiences. And when I describe, you know, briefly, I told you when I was walking through the hallway, you know, that I had hit rock bottom, and I cried out to God, and, you know, it was just the same general, like, experience. And, you know, I've always found that interesting.
Yeah.
And I do think that it is a force, and it is something that's always with us, and it is to the best way that us as people can describe it is love in its grandest forms. So, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the hardest time in your life, how it felt, and how you got through it?
The first 6 months of COVID were challenging. And again, I was very fortunate. I was someone who didn't have to go into work. I didn't have to navigate a lot of the chaos that was happening in the early months. And I was among the group of people who were stuck at home and felt like freedom had been meaningfully curtailed and was starting to spin. The other thing that had happened, so after restaurants, I had gone through a lot of career transitions, trying to find a place that really felt more like home. So I did restaurants, I did consulting, I tried career advising, I did fitness stuff for a long time in conjunction with my own athletic pursuits. And then I found storytelling. And I took a class, I was in Chicago, I took a class at Second City. And at the end of that class, you do like a little 7-minute whatever for your friends and family, and everyone claps. I went to my teacher and I was like, so how do you do an hour? How do you really go do this? And he was like, get a director, rent a theater, and bug all your friends. Okay, so I did. So wrote and produced a show, put it on for 50 people, took that show to another theater, wrote a second show, and that second show was in the middle of a run at Second City when the pandemic hit. And so I felt like I had gone through this 4-year tornado of trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing and where my energy was going and how I could do something that felt meaningful. And I felt like I finally found it, and then it was just nope, gone. And in the midst of that, that 4-year, that was also when got a dog, got a house, got another dog, got married, had a kid, all of the kind of settling down check marks, nailed them. And it didn't feel right. And you asked me earlier, what love was when I was younger. I remember what love was when I got married and when I was in that space, and it felt useless. The way I was trying to love didn't fucking work. Didn't work. So I felt like this thing that was giving me so much joy and so much momentum was gone, and I was confronted with my marriage, which was just not in a good place. And we were on top of each other in the house all day, every day. I was losing my mind. And a gift that I was able to receive, speaking of stories, our lives are shaped by story. What we can and can't do, who we are and who we aren't. These are stories. And part of them we write, part of them are written for us by other people, and we receive them. And I was stuck in the story of I want to leave, but I love her. And if I love her, I can't leave, but I have to leave. And I would just get stuck in this fucking loop. And finally, at some point, it just became, I love her, and I need to leave. This idea that two things can be true, and that it doesn't have to make sense, it doesn't have to fit a larger narrative or stereotype, just to accept what is true. And both of those things felt true. And so, good news, there's actually a pretty happy tale to that story. We did get divorced, but now we've moved together to Colorado. We have family dinner every week. We just went on vacation to celebrate my daughter's 5th birthday. We have an incredibly strong relationship amongst the three of us, and we're really happy. And we've created space for each other to find and pursue love that feels more nourishing and more fulfilling from a romantic perspective. But it's allowed what I think is a more genuine form of love to be present, because we're not also trying to be romantic partners and this and this and this and this and this. We're amazing parents for our daughter, and we support each other. It's awesome.
So you got a divorce, and what's the relationship like now? What is that dynamic? Is it just co-parenting, or is it more than that?
No, like, she was my best friend. She still is my best friend. Like, before we got divorced, we sort of had the conversations like, we feel like roommates.
Yeah.
You know, it's like roommates can be awesome. It's like we love to watch sports together. Like, we made a great pair for hosting because she was super bubbly and hospitable, and I love to cook, and so like we would host people for dinner all the time. Another thing that died in COVID. But like we forged so much dynamic that was really, really wonderful. And for the most part, all of that came with us. We had this really, really beautiful moment. God, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks after we had the initial conversation, and she was out to dinner with a friend, and I was home with the kid and the dogs. And I sent her a picture of all of us snuggling on the couch. And when she got home, she was like, "Why would you send that to me?" I said, "Because I still care about you. Because I still assume that this picture would make you happy." Mm-hmm. And it just sort of brought to the surface this desire, like, I just want you to be happy. Like, I know I don't always get it right. Like, I know that this situation is challenging. But my core desire for you to know love and to be happy isn't changed. It's just acknowledging that this structure isn't working. So let's change it.
What's the happiest moment in your life?
So prior to this experience with ayahuasca, which again, it's hard to like understand the embodiment that someone else has. You know, like I don't know exactly what you felt in your body when you had that experience with Jesus. Mm-hmm. I can imagine, but I don't know. But before that, like I used to say that running was my church. And it was a combination of like how connected I am to my body when I'm running. I'm so aware of my breathing, my footfall, my balance. Like I'm just so grounded and connected to what I'm doing. And then if I do that in a really beautiful place, like that to me was church. That was when I was like, there's something bigger than me that allows this to be possible. Like it can't possibly just be that I get to go do this. Whether or not that's true, I have no idea. And so like, right before the pandemic, early 2020, we were in Ecuador. And we were in a cloud forest, which is basically like, it's a higher rainforest. So before the rain has a chance to actually fall, you are literally in a cloud. So the air is super dense and wet and thick, but everything is so impossibly green. And I remember going for a run through the jungle. And I mentioned earlier, like when there's just so much life, it was mm-hmm. like that on steroids. And I felt so free and so alive and just so grateful for everything that was happening. And like I said, it was like, it's because I was so present that felt so ridiculously joyful.
Do you feel when you're out in nature or with other people, do you have moments of just the connection, that feeling of connection? And sometimes it's more maybe potent than others, where you feel that that's part of the reason you're feeling that joy.
No, it's funny. For me, like nature is one-on-one, because that's when I'm with God. Again, or spirit, or Mother Nature, or whatever you want to refer to him, her, it as. So no, like when I'm in nature, I'm in a great mood. Like when I pass people hiking, like I'm in a very, very jovial mood. But nature is more one-on-one. I think what you're talking about for me is what happens at concerts when people are singing together. Like that is when there's like an emotional connectivity that is really, really interesting. And then again, like you can kind of get lost in it in a way that's really, really special.
What keeps you up at night?
Falling short. Like, I love what I'm doing and I believe in what I'm doing. And in little pockets, I've been able to see how what I'm doing can create energy for other people to pursue things that they want to do. And something that has kind of come online for me more and more lately is like, I have no desire for anyone to pursue music because I do music. I don't give like, if you do, awesome. But I know that there's a spark in you and in every person that desires to go pursue something, whatever it may be, big, small, consequential, inconsequential. And life to me is listening and trusting that spark and finding a way to pursue it, particularly if it's in the face of reason or the structures in your life that deem it to be not okay. And I feel deeply inspired to spread that message and give that energy and encourage people to listen to that intuition of that spark. And on days when I feel like when the voice in here is louder, and when I don't feel like I'm doing a good enough job, or I feel like I'm somehow fucking it up, it eats at me. Because I know that there's so much good that can come from this, and I just want it to come true.
What keeps you going every day?
It's a couple things. One, generally, I love my life. Like, took a minute to get there. Like, as I mentioned, had to make a lot of substantive changes. But now, like, I've created a space. Like, my home feels so good. I love being in my house, and I love the way it feels. I love the way it smells. I love the way it looks. I have a great relationship with my body, and I love the way it moves, and I love what I can do with it. And so that's available to me all the time. I love what I'm doing for work. Not all of it. Google Analytics sucks. I don't care who you are. But in the grand scheme, again, when I think about what I get to do every day, it's awesome. Like, I'm actually going to give a much better answer that I should have started with. There's more and more talk now, which I think is good, about this idea of parenting your inner child, taking care of the little person who, you know, is still around. And for a long time, I thought that meant being like a parent, you know, like protecting them, teaching them rules, caring for them, blah, blah, blah. I think that's bullshit. I think parenting your inner child is being a hero, being a person that your inner child looks at and is like, we get to do that. Like, that gets to be our life. And every day you get to remind them, like, yes. Like, whatever fear you felt, whatever you went through, whatever you were nervous about, like, this is where we ended up. It's awesome. Like, and I feel that way most days. It makes it very easy to get out of bed.
Imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
I can do a way better job of telling people how much I love them and appreciate them. And it's so easy. The stupid thing I'll do is I'll tell myself, like, I don't have time to send them a message that's thoughtful enough, or I don't have time to call them, or I don't know if they'll pick up. And, like, you make up these stories, and it's very silly. But, like, there's so many people in my life who I know I have love for, who are awesome people out doing their best. And who wouldn't benefit from hearing, like, hey, I just want you to know I really love you, and I'm proud of you, and I'm so excited about what you're doing. Like, that would take 8 seconds. I should be sending 50 of those a day, and I don't. So if it was like, if you told me right now you're on the respirator, like, that's all you get, I would regret whatever the number of texts or emails or phone calls I wouldn't have time to make for people who genuinely deserve to hear that I love them and I care about them and that they're important to me.
So you're going to make it. You're alive and well. Do you feel that you can change or amend that regret that you just stated?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
You told me what your dreams were as a kid. What are your dreams now?
Oh, I want to play music all over the world. All over the world. And I want... Yeah, no, that's it. I just want to play music all over the world.
You're the co-author of your life story. What's your picture perfect ending?
So it's funny, like, what are my dreams? Play music all over the world. But the other is to inspire people to go do what they really feel called to do, or to be who they really feel called to be. And so right now, playing music around the world is so exciting because I haven't played outside of Colorado, right? So like that's all new. If I'm lucky, there will come a time when I've played all over the world and I've been on stages and I've met all the people. Mm-hmm. But it might be that, 10, 15, 20 years from now, I'll play a big show, and at the end I'll get to take the openers, right? The people who were there where I was, hungry, excited, nervous, unsure, and just tell them that they're loved and they're doing the right thing, and perpetuate the cycle of people who take the risk to chase what they love. Like, if I could find myself in that position of having made it over the mountain, and then to go back to the people who are starting the climb and support them through love and some form of wisdom, whatever that means, that would be pretty beautiful.